Hi, it's Ryan from Knights Around a Table, and this is a prototype copy of Lander, an area control resource management sci-fi game for 2 to 4 players. Intrepid Games has asked me to teach you how to play, so let's dive in. In Lander, you and your friends play competing corporations traveling to the planet Kamos 2 to set up a colony for incoming pioneers due to arrive 6 years later. However, your landing craft has crashed, killing most of the people on board. It's up to you and the other beset corporations to struggle through this desperate situation, completing missions, equipping your crew, exploring and exploiting the planet, and sometimes sabotaging the rival corporations in order to get the colony up and running before the ship of 5,000 settlers arrives. At the end of 5 years, whichever player has accumulated the most stars from completing missions and accolades wins. Lander comes in 3 t-shirt sizes, which determine the length and complexity of the game. I'll be teaching you the planned arrival mode, which is the full game with all of its space bells and space whistles. Now, normally I save setup until the end of the video because it's super boring. But in this case, setup kind of tells the story of the game. So let's go through it. Each player picks a corporation and then takes the matching crew roster mat, order options card, and player pieces. Then you take turns flicking a piece at the egg timer, and whoever gets their piece closest takes the colony governor token to become first player. You know, how all fair elections are decided. The big hex goes in the center of the table. That's where the titular lander has crashed. You build out the area, randomly placing these sector triangles in this pattern. Each sector represents either a solar farm, a food farm, or a titanium mine that you can exploit to earn these matching resource cards. As the game progresses, you and your opponents will be claiming these sectors, and each sector can only be occupied by a single corporation. So you can get dibs on good ones. The sectors all have small, medium, and large resource outputs. You always start on the smallest output and upgrade your way towards the biggest. A sector that has a 0 in its lowest level is called a 0-rated sector, and during setup you can't deal out more than 6 of these. If you do deal a 7th, just keep replacing it until you deal a non-0 rated sector. The 3 bronze accolades decks get shuffled and placed on the table. Turn up the top card from each deck. Achieving these accolades is one way that you can earn stars to win the game. There are also silver and gold mission decks. Turn up 1 gold mission and 2 silver missions. These cards are the other way you can earn game-winning stars. Beginning with the starting player and going clockwise, each player draws a face-down private mission either from the silver or gold decks. Randomly deal 5 cards per player into the event deck. This is your game clock. Each year, each player pulls one of these cards, and the game ends after 5 years. Shuffle the crew cards and deal 6 crew members per player into a deck. These crew members survived the crash, but they're still asleep in their stasis pods. From that stasis deck, create a draft deck of available crew members. Randomly deal player count times 2 plus 1 crew cards to form the draft deck. So, in a 4-player game, you'd make a draft deck of 9 cards. Now it's time to claim some of that sweet, sweet Kamos 2 land. Each time play comes around to you, you have 2 choices. Claim a sector or draft a crew member. If you decide to claim a sector, only 1 player can occupy each sector, and you have to put your piece in the corner with the lowest yield number on it. Or you can grab the draft deck and choose one of the remaining crew members from it. The process goes in snake order, so start with the colony governor and go clockwise, and then counterclockwise back to the starting player, and then clockwise again, and so on, until everyone has drafted 2 crew members and claimed 3 sectors, in the order most important to them. The crew member nobody drafted gets placed face up on top of the stasis deck. Aww. Picked last for baseball and colonizing an alien planet after a disastrous crash landing. Yep, ends the brakes, nerd. You then decide which of your 2 crew members will be your crew leader. place your intended leader face down on the leader slot of your crew roster, and the other person face down in crew slot 2. Each player in turn order then flips over and introduces their team leader, reading the leader's special ability from the bottom of the card to all other players. Then, everyone flips over their non-leader crew member, whose special ability doesn't matter because it's unusable, for now. You count up the number of resources due to you based on which sectors you control. So, 1 energy, 1 food, and 1 titanium, for example, and take the corresponding resource cards. If your leader's power gets you any extra stuff, you can take it now. Next, you deal 2 action cards, 1 item card, and 1 training card to each player. If you want to attach an item or training card to any of your crew members, you can do it now, even though you usually do this at the beginning of your turn. We'll look at how attaching works a little later. Finally, you fill the observation track on your crew roster with game pieces, and put 1 piece on N. There's some tough stuff going on in Lander. Hard decisions have to be made. There are some cards in the game that allow you and your opponents to attack and kill each other's crew members, to wreck sectors, and to destroy valuable activity cards. To that end, each corporation has the choice of starting the game with one of 3 items that provides protection from these unfortunate circumstances. A medipack, which can be discarded to protect a crew member from death, except in the case of a plasma bomb. It's like Mama always said, there just ain't no stopping a plasma bomb. A force field, which lets you opt out of an event that robs you of resources, and can be discarded to prevent one of your sectors from being swapped, taken, or destroyed. And a mobile storage unit, which gets you an extra activity card at the beginning of every year. Activity is the umbrella term for the items, actions, and training cards. And the mobile storage unit can be discarded to prevent the cards in your hand from being messed with. Now that you've seen your opponent's leaders and have the lay of the land, you choose one of these 3 protective items and attach it to your leader. The other 2 items go back in the box. There are other medipacks, force fields, and mobile storage units that you can collect from the item deck later in the game. In turn order, each player announces which of these items they've decided to attach. Okay, you're all set up. Now it's time to play. Each year or round of the game has 3 phases: setup, do stuff, and cleanup. In the year setup phase, in turn order, each player draws an event card and reads it to the other players. These events are sometimes crises that have befallen the planet, like electrical storms or earthquakes. And sometimes they give you a choice pertaining to crew, construction, or logistics. Sometimes an effect gets resolved immediately, and sometimes it has an effect that lasts for the whole round. Some events impact just 1 player, and some affect all corporations. It really depends. If you draw an event card that gives you a choice, place a game piece on the choice you've made. Some choices include the word can, which means doing nothing is an option. Some cards indicate the player with the highest or lowest whatever. In those cases, if everyone is at 0 in whatever, you ignore the card. If everyone is tied for whatever, the player who drew the event card gets to choose who it affects. If any of the events give you an item or training card, you can decide to attach the card to a crew member right away, even though that usually has to happen during your turn, as we'll see later on. If you draw a persistent event that occurs through the entire year that requires you to meet some sort of level threshold, you can choose that option even if you don't meet the threshold, with the hope that you will by the time the year's finished. Next, going in turn order, each player draws a new sector tile and connects it to any existing sector, and then places a new structure in the closest unoccupied sector adjacent to a sector they already own. For this game's purposes, adjacency counts along edges, but not along corners. So these 2 sectors are adjacent to this blue-controlled sector, but this one isn't. As for the closest available sector adjacent to the blue player in this situation, there aren't any. So blue would have to skip over some sectors owned by opposing corporations. So this one is the closest unoccupied sector nearest blue. Again, your structure always goes in the corner with the lowest resource number. Next, you collect your resource income. You'll get resources based on the output numbers of structures that you have on different sectors. So, one structure here gets you 1 titanium card, while 2 structures gets you 3 cards. And having 3 structures gets you 4 titanium cards. You could also be entitled to resources from events or from whatever your leader does. Resolve resource gathering in this order. Resources from items first, then events, then leadership abilities, and finally from sector production. Each new year also nets you a mitt full of new cards. Each player gets 2 new action cards, 1 item card, and 1 training card. With the year set up, starting with the colony governor and going clockwise, you and the other players take turns making orders. You've got this menu of available orders next to your crew roster. Remember that game piece you placed on the little N on your roster? Well, that means you're still in the game, actively making orders. If play comes around to you and you can't or don't want to make an order, you slide your piece over to the Y space. Now you've passed, and everyone else keeps playing and making orders until everyone has slid their piece to the Y. There are 3 types of orders you can make. Anytime orders, which you can make anytime during the game, even when it's not your turn. Free orders, which you have to make at the beginning of your turn. And official orders, which are the main meaty actions in the game. You can make a maximum of 1 official order on your turn. These official orders let you pay the specified resources to buy a card from the activity decks, action, item, or training. Over here, you can pay 2 energy and 2 titanium to upgrade one of your sectors. Place another structure on a sector you already own going counterclockwise around the triangle. You can pay 2 food and 2 titanium to draw a new sector tile, connect it anywhere on the planet, and build a structure in the nearest unoccupied adjacent sector to one of your existing sectors, following the same placement rules we've already talked about. If you pay 2 energy and 2 food, you can wake up a crew member from stasis. Take the top crew member from the deck and put him or her in an empty slot on your crew roster. If you don't have an empty slot, or you want to make this new crew member your leader, knock out the crew member occupying the slot and put him or her back into stasis at the bottom of the deck. Any attachments that crew member might have had get discarded. If you knock out your leader, you can't promote any of your existing crew to leader. You have to fill the leader slot with your newest crew member from the deck. Crew members can have traits like resilient and diplomatic, and classes like engineering and science. And those classes have levels. Traits and classes come into play when you're trying to equip and train your crew members, score accolades, complete missions, play action cards, and resolve event cards. If you don't like the face-up crew member, this order lets you pay 2 energy, 2 food, and 1 of any resource to draw the top crew member and the 2 face-down crew members underneath. Choose one and bury the others at the bottom of the stasis deck. You can make an official order to play an action card. These cards come in a few varieties, and they have prerequisites that you have to meet in order to play them. These prereqs either apply to one of your crew members or to your entire crew. So this swap leader card requires at least one of your crew members to have the strategic trait, and the sum of your crew's operations class has to be 7 or more. Then you can play the card. You can only play this extra mission card if one of your crew members is innovative and has a cumulative engineering class ranking of at least 3. So the black bar refers to your whole crew, while the white bar refers to a single member of your crew. Action cards can provide all kinds of benefits in every nook and cranny of the game, either to help you or to hinder your foes. Some action cards are double-ended. They have a positive effect on one side and a negative effect on the other. As long as you meet the prerequisite, you can play either end of the card on your crew member or on someone else's. The effects of the card last for the remainder of the year. You can make an official order to use a leadership ability on either your leader or on a member who has leadership training. This only works on active abilities, not passive ones. If an ability is one use per year, put a game piece on the card indicating you've used it. The Observe official order lets you stay in the game without actually doing anything. You remove a playing piece from your observation track, and then play continues with the next player in turn order. There are all kinds of ways to use this order strategically, from biding your time while the other players spend all their cards, to waiting for someone else to wake a crew member from stasis so you can see who gets turned up next. You have 10 total observations available to you for the entire game. Make this official order to complete a mission, either one of the public ones on the table or a private mission from your personal stash. If you meet the requirements, pay any listed resources and claim the mission card, or flip it face up if it was a private mission. You gain the number of stars in the top left corner of the card, and whoever gets the most stars by the end wins. Then you have to replace the mission with a new one. You get to decide whether the replacement mission comes from either the silver or gold decks. As you've probably guessed, silver missions are generally easier to complete than gold missions, so there's some strategy to deciding what comes out next. Because the mission cards can be a little bit difficult to read, and because they're crucial to winning the game, the publisher has created a tool on their website where you can queue up the public missions and view them on your phone or on your computer, so that everyone doesn't have to constantly extend their robo-neck like Inspector Gadget in order to read the cards. Go, Gadget! Where the hell are my glasses? Down here, you can spend your official order negotiating with your opponents to trade cards with them. You can initiate a trade using any activity card, items, actions, or training. Or you can trade resource cards. Here's how it works. You make an official request involving a card, like, I've got a cool food-related item someone might want, or I need an attachment card that gives me at least 2 engineering. If no one is interested, you've blown it. You have to make a different official order, and it can't be another negotiation. If you get more than one interested party, you pick the player you want to trade with. You each put down one activity or a resource card as collateral. If you don't have any extra card to use as collateral, you're required to accept whatever counteroffer your trading partner makes. If your trading partner doesn't have a card to lay down as collateral, the trading partner can entertain your offer, but isn't bound to complete the trade. Now, one of the 2 players puts the card in question face down in the middle of the table. This is the food-related item card, or the card that grants at least 2 engineering, whatever was discussed in the trade proposal. You're not allowed to lie during a negotiation, so this card can't be bogus. So if you made a request for a certain card, your trading partner puts that card on the table, and you're the receiving partner. If you offered a card, then you put the card on the table, and your trading partner is the receiving partner. In either case, the egg timer gets flipped. The receiving partner examines the face-down card and makes a counteroffer, which the other player can look at and potentially counter-offer. A maximum of 5 cards total can be involved in a negotiation, and the final deal doesn't even have to involve the card that was originally discussed. When the egg timer runs out, if the 2 trading players have agreed to a trade, they swap their cards and the game continues with the next player in turn order. If they couldn't come to an agreement within the time limit, the 2 trading partners swap their collateral cards and the negotiation ends. If you received any cards in a trade, you can't do anything with them until your next turn. If you don't have the cards you want, you can make the Consolidate Activities official order. Discard any 3 activity cards. Then you can draw 3 total activity cards, selecting from any activity card deck. Keep 1 and discard the other 2 to their respective discard piles. This probability table at the back of the rulebook can help you determine how successful you'll be at fishing for the card you want. The orders along the top of the card are actions that you can take that don't use a main official order. The ones over here are actions you can take any time, even when it's not your turn. This one lets you earn an accolade. These 3 accolade cards measure stuff you can do in the game, like developing adjacent colonies or completing research missions. The star means you have to have achieved that many of this thing in order to qualify. You put a playing piece on the card to mark your achievement, and that earns you X stars by the end of the game. Unless someone comes along later and beats your record. Well, then your piece gets kicked off and they take over the card. There's no tying on accolade cards. You have to beat the leader's score by at least 1 point to get on the board. This anytime order lets you play an action card that has this symbol on it, as long as you meet the prereq. This suite of free orders has to be taken at the beginning of your turn before you make your official order. You can take as many free orders as you like. The first one lets you attach a training card to one of your crew members. Each crew member has 4 attachment slots. You can attach a training card to any crew member with a free slot, with 2 exceptions. You can only have 1 leadership training card across your entire crew. And you can't double up on traits. So you can't have a crew member with 2 or more fanatical cards on him, even though that sort of makes sense. The training cards boost your crew members' abilities. Many of these cards are double-ended, so you pick the attribute you want to train, but once you pick, the other end of the card doesn't count, and you can't change your mind about the rotation later on. And these numbers stack, so a crew member with these 2 training cards attached now has an engineering level of 7. Once a crew member has been trained, he or she generally can't unlearn stuff, so these training cards basically take up an attachment slot permanently, barring any chicanery from your opponents. Items work a little differently. You can make this free order off the top of your turn to attach, move, or discard an item from a crew member. Some items have prerequisites on them that the crew member has to meet before you can attach them. If a crew member is using an item and somehow falls below the prerequisite threshold, then he or she gets to keep using the item anyway, unless you move that item off the crew member and try to move it back again. Some items raise an attribute level across all crew members. So this one boosts the science level of your whole crew by 1 for any crew member who has at least level 1 science to begin with. It doesn't give everybody 1 science, it increases anyone's existing science class by 1. These exoskeletons give your crew member an extra storage slot. They don't take up an attachment slot themselves, but if you attach an item behind an exoskeleton, you can move the item to another crew member on its own, or move it together with the exoskeleton as a unit. Exoskeletons can be discarded, moved, or stolen by other players, just like any other item. And if another player steals your exoskeleton, any item attached with the exoskeleton comes with it. If you have a training card attached behind an exoskeleton, it essentially locks the exoskeleton in place. Neither the training card nor the exoskeleton can be moved, discarded, or stolen. If you have an exoskeleton equipped, it sort of floats to the back of your attachment stack. You can attach a card either in front of or behind it, but only 1 card at a max can be behind it. And finally, the last free order you can make is to discard 2 of the same resource cards to get 1 of any other resource. So 2 energy cards gets you 1 titanium, for example. If you've passed by moving your game piece to the Y on your crew roster, you have to wait until all active players have passed and ended the year. After you've passed, you can't make any free or official orders, but you can still make anytime orders, and you can still participate in negotiations as long as someone else initiates them. When all players have passed, you prepare for year end. You have to discard down to a hand limit of 5 resource cards and 5 activity cards. Any temporary cards in play get scrapped. You remove the piece you used to remember your leader's active ability was spent, if applicable. You pass the colony governor marker to the next player in clockwise order, and you go through the setup phase for the next year. When the 5th and final year ends, you count up the stars you've earned on your mission cards and accolades. Whoever has the most stars wins. If there's a tie, shuffle the unused accolade cards and draw one, and then award those stars to whoever has achieved it. If no one qualifies, Keep flipping accolade cards until you find your winner. And now you're ready to play Lander. Did you just watch that whole thing? Oh, hey, to 100% this video, click the badge to subscribe and then click the bell to get notifications when I've got new stuff.